Hi, this time we present Social Justice Studies from the University of Victoria. A lecture by Dr. May-Wynne Ashford with the theme Changing the World. Dr. Ashford suggests that collecting millions of signatures on paper in the 90s caused the International Court of Justice to declare the Landmines Treaty and the non-proliferation of nuclear weapons. It did not happen overnight. It took several years, but in the end, civil society, with great determination, was successful. With today's technology, registering your vote or opinion about social justice on nowpolling.ca is much easier. Remember that your participation on nowpolling.ca is the essence of direct democracy. Here is May-Wynne.
My talk is called Changing the World, What Works? I think 10 or 15 years ago, had I been giving this talk, it would have been Changing the World, can they have any impact? Or can one person make a difference? Or can a million people make a difference? And I was fairly discouraged working on the nuclear issue, thinking that maybe we would never make a difference. But in fact, now I know that we are making a huge difference, and that is what I'm going to talk about. As the number of major wars and genocides, that means more than 1,000 battle deaths per year, increased or decreased since the end of the Cold War in 1991. Anyway, the answer is major wars and genocides have decreased by 90% since 1991. That's the end of the Cold War. And the big question is, why don't we know this information? Why is it such a shock when I tell people this information, and it's now been out for 4 years? This is information in the Human Security Report. The Center for Human Security was at UBC under Lloyd Axworthy. It's now at Simon Fraser. You can pull off this report on the internet. It's, I think, 73 pages or something like that. It is totally eye-opening reading. And each year they present a new report, and each time it's even more thrilling than the one before, and we are making progress year by year by year. Okay, what about wars in general? Because many people have felt that if these big wars have declined, then obviously people have to go on fighting. So now they're fighting inside their own borders. Armed conflicts in general, this is smaller conflicts, have decreased by 40% since 1991. Same reference. 60 dictators have been toppled with minimal violence since 1986, when Marcos was toppled in the Philippines. Civil society, and this is a definition from Nicholas Perlas. He says, civil society is the conscience that constrains the actions of government and big business. So all of the different groups that you belong to and all the ways that you work as an individual, acting as the social conscience of whatever power brokers you're dealing with, everything that you do in that sense is your role as civil society. So if you happen to work for the government, but you are in fact not representing them, you're representing Native women's rights, then you're working in civil society and your job happens to be with the government. And that's great. Perlas says that there are 3 pillars to society: government, a healthy economy, and a strong civil society. And all 3 of them have to be strong and have to be effectively working. Now, when I read this book, I can't remember the title of this book, but anyway, when I read it, it changed the way that I related to government officials and my member of parliament when I was meeting with them, because I no longer thought of them the way I did when I was just out there protesting all the time, and I felt like I was knocking on the door and saying, please, please listen to us about nuclear weapons. You have to hear how terrible they are. Then I realized I was one of these 3 pillars. Well, here I am. I've come to speak to you as one of the 3 pillars of our society. And I can tell you I'm concerned about nuclear weapons, and I want you to be concerned too. It's a totally different feeling inside to know that you have the power that Perlas and others are talking about. What I discovered, I suppose what I knew in working in disarmament for so many years, is that it's better to light one candle than forever curse the darkness. We can spend an awful lot of time crabbing and complaining, but if instead we can go out and do one deed that might make a small difference, and we never know what kind of difference we're going to make, that's way better. So the first one I'll talk about is the Landmines Treaty. In 1993, there was a little meeting held in a convent in London, and the organizers called for leaders of NGOs, non-governmental organizations, who had some kind of interest in peace and disarmament, to meet in London to talk about the possibility of trying to get a ban on landmines, anti-personnel landmines. So I went. There were 50 people. It was organized by Jody Williams and the Vietnam Veterans of America Foundation, but it brought in leaders from the International Committee of the Red Cross, Handicap International, Mines Action Group in London, the deminers who go out and train local people how to remove landmines, and so on. A very, very high-powered group. And that particular little conference was a real eye-opener for me. We met for 3 days. The first day was all education, learning about what landmines do from the perspective of surgeons and rehab physicians, from the point of view of economics, from the point of view of the deminers, from the point of view of the military. And then in the second day, we started to strategize, and by the time of the third day, we had a group of journalists from the alternative press and alternative media, including documentary filmmaking, and they just stood up and they said, all right, here's what we have to do. And we had 3 hours, and I have just never sort of, you know that poster of the guy who's listening to the stereo and his hair is blowing out behind him? That's how I felt, like, whoo! They said, we need people who know leaders in government who are likely to be sympathetic. Do not waste your time trying to convince someone that you know if you already know they're not sympathetic. Go directly to the ones who are likely to be on our side. Who knows some celebrities? We need celebrities in film, in music. We need Princess Diana. Once we got Princess Diana, I'll tell you, things really started to move. Lloyd Axworthy was the one in the Canadian government who was the point person and absolutely centrally important in getting the treaty. They said, now we're going to start writing, and we write stories, we need illustrations. So we need all of your photographs, all of your movie footage. If you're a surgeon, we want all of the photographs in the operating room. We want everything to show the impact of landmines. We want little children. We want the story about the mother in Cambodia, the children in Mozambique. We know all of these stories have to come out. And within 6 months, the International Committee of the Red Cross had a movie out, and there were pictures appearing in magazines, color, big weekend magazines. So after the magazines came more long-term things, bigger documentaries, and then we started seeing the impact in local newspapers where groups were taking up this issue. Now, 1993 was when it started. 1996, 3 years later, Lloyd Axworthy called a meeting of like-minded states to come to Ottawa to bypass the Conference on Disarmament in Geneva and talk about the possibility of writing a landmines treaty. All of those countries came, and Lloyd got so excited by the whole thing, he said, meet back here a year from now in December and we will sign the treaty. And in the meantime, we're going to write it.